Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. This is our group. We are from group 8. So today we will talk about isolationism and internationalism in foreign policy. So we will be covering the definition of isolationism, and the second one is the reasons why state use isolationism in foreign policy. The third one is application of isolationism in states' foreign policy. The fourth one in impacts and result of isolationism, and case study about isolationism in foreign policy. And for the internationalism part, we'll be covering the definition. The second one is the reason why state use internationalism in foreign policy. Third one is the application of internationalism in a state's foreign policy. And the fourth one is impacts and result of internationalism, and the case study about internationalism in foreign policy.
Hi everyone, I'm Shamya Devi Mariappan. My metric number is 2753 and 22. I'm here to present about the definition of isolationism, the reason why states practice isolationism in their foreign policy, and the application of foreign policy of isolationism being practiced in their state's foreign policy. Thank you. Isolationism, defined as a set of policies that result in non-intervention and avoidance of political alliance that may lead to war and tend to like George Washington. Isolationism happens when a nation separates itself from other countries in an effort to keep a certain interest, like the political or the trade affairs of other governments at the distance. Next, economic regionalism is the institutional arrangement designed to facilitate the free flow of goods, service, and also to coordinate foreign economy policy. This attempt is to manage the opportunities and constraints created by the dramatic increase in international economic ties since the end of World War II. The most basic form is a free trade movement, which eliminates or greatly reduces customs duties between each members, whereby custom union creates a greater degree of integration through a common tariff on non-members, and a common market add to these arrangements by allowing a free movement of capital and labor. A sphere of influence is the international politics that claim by a state to predominate control over the foreign area. Refer to a legal agreement which by another state or states pledged themselves to refrain from intervenes within the sphere of influence. When colonial expansion came to a close after World War I, sphere of influence in the legal sense lost much of their importance. Irredentism focuses more on theoretical claim based on national ethics or historical basis. Irredentism is from Italian word meaning unredeemed. The importance in international relations is based on the intersection between nationalism and the causes of war, because such a movement invariably means taking a land from other states. Increased focus on domestic policy. Government can become too distracted by foreign affairs and neglect domestic issues and policy. Focus more intently and due to decreased investment in foreign aid and welfare. Decreased need for spending on military budget. Guys, country has an isolationist stances that there are great savings to be made in this area. These savings could be spent on other programs that could benefit the country's citizens and develop the country in many ways.
Hi, my name is Isam Taimi. Here I'm gonna explain about impact and results of internationalism in foreign policy. And I got 3 points for the impacts. The first one is the USA became isolated from other countries, both economically, trade, and politically, by staying out of the affairs of other countries. Second one, the aim of isolationism ultimately damaged world peace as the USA failed to join the League of Nations. Many now saw the League as a talking shop with no teeth. And the last one is immigration levels were reduced as the US began to fear foreigners, threat to jobs, and general distrust. Their policies were designed to keep out Africans, Asians and South Americans, whilst continuing to allow in white Europeans. And the result of internationalism in foreign policy is first is unemployment and strikes. There's 4 points. And the result of internationalism in foreign policy is first is unemployment and strikes. There's 4 points. The first one is 4 million soldiers came home. Second one, industrial workers were laid off and as industrial demands fell. Third one, price doubled. And the last one is employers refused to increase wage. And then there is a fear of radicalism. There is 3 points on it. First is communist parties established, and second one is anarchists started bomb attacks, and the last one is people feared revolution. And the last one about the result is race riots. White communities attack blacks, and last one is blacks face discrimination and poor economic circumstances after the war. The study of isolationism in U.S. foreign policy. So during the 2016 election campaign, President Trump championed a policy of intervention and isolation in U.S. foreign policy, which aroused fears among European North Atlantic Treaty Organization allies about U.S. commitments to collective defense. And second one is Trump's campaign's rhetoric was likely designed to raise questions about the U.S. commitment to NATO. Trump's words revived the debate over interventionism versus isolationism in U.S. foreign policy. And now I'm gonna explain about the definition of internationalism. So the definition is progressive politics is basically the sharing of benefits among the nation states in the international political. Bringing the states back to progressive politics is known as internationalism. Internationalism is something beyond nationalism. It is a political principle which transcends nationalism and advocates greater political or economic cooperation among nations and people. Or in another sense, internationalism is associated with other political movements and ideologies, but can also reflect a doctrine, belief system, or movement in itself.
There are four main reasons on why states use internationalism in foreign policy. The first reason is they want to gain the acceptance by other nations. The concept of internationalism is a political principle which transcends nationalism and advocates greater political and economic cooperation among nations and people. Hence, by cooperating with other nations, states can gain acceptance by other nations. The second reason is to maintain a good relationships with other countries. Maintaining good relationships with other countries is very crucial nowadays because the power system is based on multilateralism. When a country did something, for sure their action will have the ramification. So in order to avoid this kind of situations, they must maintain a good relationships with others. The third reason is to secure profit in economic field, and the last one is to protect the peace and security of their country. The practice of internationalism involves supranational organizations such as the United Nations, African Union, Arctic Council, this supranational organization is founded to maintain international peace and security. Right now, I will talk about the application of internationalism in state foreign policy. So how can states apply internationalism in their foreign policy? Firstly, they can support the initiative that promotes peace. Using foreign policy to build world peace is a powerful strategy to promote internationalism. There are two major foreign policy tools that nation states use to achieve this goal. The first one is incentives. It offers closer international relation, and the second one is sanction. Sanction is about cutting off relations such as trade with a state until hostile behavior stops. Sometimes sanction can be inhumane. For example, the economic sanction on Iraq as the effort during the Gulf War have killed 1.5 million of people in Iraq in the span of 12 years. Secondly, through foreign aid. Countries also promote internationalism by delivering foreign aid. Every year, billions of dollars are transferred from developed to developing countries for humanitarian and other purposes. This money may be used to provide medical supplies, food, clothing, and building supplies. Foreign aid may also be directed toward infrastructure projects such as sewage treatment facilities and road building. Foreign aid has the greatest impact when countries coordinate their foreign aid policies. This internationalist approach involves both the countries giving the aid and those receiving it in making decisions about the most effective use of foreign aid dollars. This helps avoid delays created by debates over where funds should be directed. Lastly, through international law and agreements. International cooperation is essential when the national interests or foreign policy goals of one country conflict with those of another. To help resolve the disputes arising from these conflicts, a body of international law has developed. International law is based on international treaties, agreements, conventions, UN resolutions, and widely accepted as international practices. International law is interpreted by the UN's International Court of Justice or World Court. The World Court tries to settle international disputes peacefully, but sometimes countries are reluctant to recognize its authority or abide by its decisions. In some cases, this is because governments do not want to surrender the right to make decisions based on their own national interests. The United States, for example, has refused to accept the authority of the World Court since 1986. At that time, the court ruled that the US had violated a number of international law by helping rebels who were trying to overthrow the government of Nicaragua. So the impacts and result of internationalism in foreign policy. Firstly, the greater interdependence among states. This is because internationalism stresses on the cooperation among states. To resolve certain issues, states can attract investment more easily. And lastly, global issues can be addressed more effectively. For example, poverty, world hunger, disease, debt, climate change, and human rights. The involvement of supranational organizations such as the United Nations, the Arctic Council can be addressed these global issues more effectively. And the impacts of internationalism in foreign policy are, firstly, when different countries are working together and have common goals, there are going to be problems involved in the process. And lastly, the sovereignty of states at stake because sometimes too much involvement from other nations can threaten the sovereignty of a state because they might have their own national interests that they want to achieve by involving in other states' affairs. So I will talk about the case study about internationalism in the Arctic that affected its sovereignty and the issue of climate change. As we all know, all land, internal waters, territorial seas, and EEZ in the Arctic are under the jurisdiction of the Arctic Council state. International law regulates this area as with other portions of Earth. Under international law, the North Pole and the region of the Arctic Ocean surrounding it are not owned by any country. The 5 surrounding Arctic countries are limited to a territorial sea of 12 nautical miles. Upon ratification of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, a country has a 10-year period to make claims to an extended continental shelf which, if validated, give it exclusive rights to resources on or below the seabed on that extended shelf area. Norway, Russia, Canada and Denmark launched projects to provide a basis for seabed claims on extended continental shelf beyond their exclusive economic zones. So this concept of internationalism in the Arctic has caused dispute between the members of the Arctic Council. For example, the issue of Northwest Passage legal status. The legal status of the Northwest Passage is disputed because Canada considers it to be a part of its internal waters according to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The United States and most maritime nations consider them to be an international strait, which means that foreign vessels have right of transit passage. In such a regime, Canada will have the right to enact fishing and environmental regulation and fiscal and smuggling laws, as well as laws intended for the safety for shipping, but not the right to close the passage. We can see under the concept of internationalism, when different countries are working together, have common goals, there are going to be problems involved in the process. By preventing drilling, we can protect the Arctic for the millions of people and animals that call it home and stop fossil fuel companies from making climate change worse. Our planet is too precious to be exploited for corporate profits. Besides, not only the sovereignty of the Arctic is at stake, but this interference of other nations in this area has caused further damage, which is global warming issue. According to World Economic Forum, since the 1970s, the world has lost 75% of the volume of the Arctic summer of ice. So why this thing a constant? This is because melting ice speeds climate change. Global warming is causing Arctic ice to melt. Ice reflects sunlight while water absorbs it. When the Arctic ice melts, the ocean around it absorbs more sunlight and heats up, making the world warmer as a result. After discussing this issue that happened in the Arctic, we conclude that sometimes the usage of internationalism in foreign policy and states affairs can cause damage as everyone is fighting to achieve their own national interests. So, as the conclusion, isolationism is when a nation separates itself from other countries in an effort to keep a certain interest. Meanwhile, the internationalism is about progressive politics, the sharing of benefits among the nation states in the international paradigm. The rise of supranational organizations like the United Nations, African Union, European Union makes it easier for the nation to cooperate with each other. Hence, we can conclude that today's world is more keen to internationalism than isolationism. So that's all from us, and thank you for listening.